Well, ladies and gentlemen, actually a difficult video to make today. Really difficult. Really difficult making this kind of content to everyone online because you have to understand the rationality behind why I make the content that I make. And that is, I actually love South Africa. I love living here. I love the country as a whole. I love the people. And so to a large degree, I actually don't want any of you to immigrate. You see, the biggest reason I don't want any of you to immigrate is because I think the country is wonderful. I actually think it's worthwhile trying to save the country. The reason that often we make the content that we do is because we want you to be aware of what's going on. And in some respects, we want you to fight for the things that matter in the country, whether that be protesting, whether it be writing through to your politician, whether it be signing an online application or whatever. Get involved in your political sphere. Don't just ignore what's going on. Write to your local MP, for example. But you see, South Africa suffers from something really odd. And that is, when things are difficult, the number one response is usually, I'm going to leave. I'm going to immigrate. And to a large degree that I'm willing to give up on the country of my birth and my country of many of my ancestors. Okay, it might not be 5,000 years with their ancestors. It may only be 5 or 6, maybe sometimes up to 15 generations of ancestors. They're still your people. They still died for this land that you call your home. There are days, though, when you read certain articles that I can understand why people feel the need to want to escape what I can then describe it as the lingering nonsense. But before we actually get on to the main news article itself, I just want to remind everybody, I haven't been asking you for a while, but please subscribe to the channel. This help get the numbers up. The numbers at the moment have been kind of stagnating since I stopped asking people to subscribe. So hit the bell icon and subscribe. It's free. Anyway, the actual news story itself that I'm referring to is actually a podcast that was done by Nota. And during this podcast on the Hustler's Corner podcast, he made some rather inflammatory allegations, and here they are for you to see.
The problem that South Africans have right now is that we don't understand white people. White people are inferior species to us. We are Homo sapiens. They've got Neanderthal blood in them. This is the science. And this is not science that was done by black people. It was done by them. You understand? Abu Clive W. Lewis, they were eugenicists. They studied this and they realized that they're inferior to blacks. The white population is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. For us, it makes no sense to descend into the savagery that they have. Whatever land that they're holding on to, either way, their numbers are dwindling. Whatever leadership that they had is dying out as well. And you know about wealth disappearing after the third generation that it's passed down to, So they're on the last generation. We're dealing with the weakest whites that the world has ever seen. So we expect to have Ubuntu, humanity. Unfortunately, by the strictest definition of what a human being is, white people are just below human beings. You are negotiating with an animal, a wild dog that you're trying to train to be tamed, to be upopi, who guards your house. You can never do that. So we're expecting Ubuntu from them. We're like, you stole our land, you butchered our people and everything else, and we just want justice. We're not out for your blood. We're not chopping off your heads. We're not doing anything. Why don't you guys understand that? Why don't you guys have Ubuntu? Why don't you guys have a heart? They don't, because they're incapable of that. You cannot expect the same behavior of a human being that you're expecting of a dog.
Now, it's ironic that there's a number of things that he actually says in this entire article that one has to really, really question. The first is the use of eugenics. The last time I remember eugenics actually featuring in a main debate was with Hitler. Yes, Hitler. And it's amazing that the individual now refers to eugenics whilst referencing white individuals, specifically the allegation that white individuals have Neanderthal DNA. Now, if you actually go and you fact check this, you'll find that there's something really, really interesting in the allegation itself, and that is the actual scientific literature suggests that basically non-African populations have between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA. Now, that DNA basically means that it's beneficial, specifically in terms of immunostrength, skin adaptation to colder environments, and metabolism. However, that strain of DNA also has a higher risk of autoimmune diseases and some metabolic disorders. Okay, none of it actually relates to intelligence. They see the reason you can't actually do these type of checks for intelligence is that intelligence is very, very complicated. It ranges not just around environmental factors or genetic lineage, it also revolves around the actual access to language, the access to learning materials, the building materials, the whole idea of nurture, and so forth. Yes, there are some inherent markers that do mean that some individuals are smarter than others, but on the whole, a stupid individual can still teach themselves into becoming smart, and a person that's genetically smart can still be really stupid by basically not being bothering to learn. So intelligence is one of those things you just have to be a little bit careful on. However, this idea that Neanderthal DNA in whites makes them inferior is, as even the AI says, basically a form of racial claim for genetic inferiority. And quite often is pushed by ideological narratives. They're not actually being pushed by actual science. Now, I thought we all understood this when we dealt with the Nazis, but apparently in South Africa we don't. Because you see, according to this individual, whites are basically inferior to the point where we're dogs. Yes, we're equivalent to dogs and animals. And you have to treat us as such. Now that you see, that is a form of dehumanization. And I'm frequently reminded in the media about all the dehumanization that goes on, apparently from white people to black people. But apparently when black people do it to white people, it's not dehumanization. Is it addressing the racial injustices of the past? Now, I often see in the comment sections comments like, yes, but your ancestors did this and therefore we can do it and blah, blah, blah. You see, there's a problem with that rationality. There's a problem with that line of reasoning. And the actual problem with that line of reasoning is that what you're effectively doing is you're debasing the argument. You're reducing the argument to nothing more than revenge. And you see, you can't correct a historical injustice with a present injustice, because that just leads to more, redress and reconciliation, whatever rubbish that goes on in the future. You have to get to a point where you take a principled position of equality amongst the individuals, and you just go, okay, well, now we're just going to have to move forward, and neither of you can do this. It's what we used to call claiming the moral high ground. But what we frequently see is that the moral high ground is claimed by many individuals of Caucasian descent, with many individuals of a previously disadvantaged descent basically saying that they don't have to take the moral high ground because they were slighted in the past. And what's interesting is that it is factual that the white population in South Africa has declined, but hasn't declined because of genetic markers. It's declined because in many instances, the country is deemed to be inhospitable to that specific racial group. It's inhospitable to their kids and their kids' future. So in many instances, those individuals seek opportunities abroad because they don't see the opportunities in the country that's there. This isn't a reflection on the racial demographic. It's actually a reflection on the state of the nation. You see, and this individual doesn't seem to actually know that, because according to them, it's actually just that whites are, crap. They see, when you start to actually reduce the argument down to this form of rhetoric, this form of dehumanization, Rwanda happens. Nazi Germany happens. And I thought we had all understood that that wasn't acceptable. Isn't that the reason that we can't use certain language? Because you can't profile an entire group of individuals in South Africa. And so I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, what are the South African Human Rights Commission going to do? Because when Ronaldo Close and various other individuals use slights that many took to be incorrect, for want of a better word, they were quick to go file cases in the various courts around the country in order to ruin those individuals' lives. They got them fired from their jobs and so forth. And the question I would ask is, why are they not doing the same in this instance? Why is there a degree of two-tier justice? Based on what? Historical injustices? An injustice is still an injustice, regardless of when it is done. You can't say, well, this is a rule for white people. White people can't do that, but a black person can because of what? Revenge? And so I would encourage you, ladies and gentlemen, go lodge your complaints with the Human Rights Commission, because it deserves it. This deserves media attention. When this language is done by white individuals, the president goes on and addresses it in front of the nation and says it's unacceptable. And I ask the simple question, why is the favor never returned? Whilst also then claiming when Trump says bad things are happening in South Africa and they've been condoned by the national government, when the government says we don't condone these things, well, in instances like this, I would say, yes, you do, because the evidence shows us completely otherwise. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have to end this episode by saying, basically, look, don't take this too hard. Don't run off and want to just immigrate and run away from your problems. Because believe me, these problems occur in other countries too. America has very similar issues. You just don't know it because you don't read the news in the same way that I do. You also don't see it in the way that I do, but they have the same issues. However, I don't also want you to just condone this. I want you to do what this podcast is designed to do. So inform you and give you the information so that you can act on it. And there are ways you can act on it. Filing your complaint to the Human Rights Commission, as an example. Writing to your MP, asking them to look into it. These are all things that you can do. And they're all good options for you to do in forms of civic engagement. Anyway, that's just my views. You can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until tomorrow, bye.